Welcome back, everybody, to another week of Junior Developer Happy Hour. We just started this in the springtime when the pandemic really hit and there were a bunch of hiring freezes and layoffs going on. And Sam and I actually didn't know each other back then, but independently both wanted to try to help people who were going for their first job in tech and just try to prevent people from giving up, because it's in general a tricky process getting your first job in tech. We just wanted to give support where we could. So the format of this is AMA, ask us anything. And how it works, I have this link right here that I can drop in our Zoom chat. That is the best place in the Slido. That's the best place to ask questions for us to get answered. It's the best place because you can upvote them, and that way we'll be able to, if everybody is voting for the questions that they are curious to hear answers to, we'll be able to get to the questions that the most people are interested in hearing. And then if there are any sort of follow-up questions, or if there are resources that we end up talking about that we can link to, that can go in the Zoom chat itself right in here. And then, yeah, as Sam just said, he's got a Headspace code for a free year subscription of Headspace that we can give away. I'm not sure what his plan is of when that's going to happen, but stay tuned. It should happen sometime today. If you're able to and want to hang out until the very end, that's when we will stop recording and invite people to come off mute, and then we can have more of a normal conversation instead of just a little conversation among a couple of people. So that's it about the meetup. I'm Brady. I'm a full stack engineer at Nordstrom. I went to Dev Bootcamp back in 2017 in Chicago and have been working at Trunk Club ever since. So that's enough about me. I will pass it off to Sam then.
Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Sam. Currently on sabbatical. I'm a front-end engineer. I've been focusing mainly on front end for probably like the past 5 years or something. I've been doing software engineering for about 7 years professionally. I got a computer science degree a long time ago. I failed to break into the industry the first time. I gave up too easily. And then 11 years later, I went to Dev Bootcamp. After doing all kinds of other stuff, I joined the Peace Corps. And after I was finished with the Peace Corps, when I came back, that's when I went to Dev Bootcamp. And then that was spring 2013. And since then, I've done all kinds of stuff. Worked at a tiny startup, big company with like 10,000 people. I worked at Pivotal Labs, where they do 100% pair programming. And I was most recently at Lyft, working on internal tools for the mapping organization. So I've been in all different kinds of work environments. So yeah, that's a bit about me. I'm in the Bay Area right now, and I'm in the process of moving to Tulsa, Oklahoma, which I'll be going there next week. So we don't have Junior Developer Happy Hour next week because it's going to be too chaotic for me. I'm moving next weekend, and it's a big move for me. I downsized everything to 2 suitcases. So starting again. All right, we can have our special guests introduce themselves. Maybe Sairina can go first. Did I say your name right? I don't. I've been saying it
Yeah,
Sairina. Okay.
no, it's perfect. That's exactly right. So, hey everyone, my name is Sairina. I am a junior full stack engineer at a nonprofit called Learning Equality. I graduated from a boot camp called Rhythm School over in San Francisco in April of 2020. So right in the middle of the pandemic. It was really awesome because I was also pregnant while I was going through my boot camp, and I also had a 1.5-year-old at the time. And so right after I graduated, I gave birth. And then I went and found a job. So, you know what, women, we can have it all. We can do anything. That being said, before I went into tech, I was actually in education. And I guess the reason why I made the switch, so I started right out of college, I went into Teach for America, and I taught for 2 years over in New York City. And I just kept going with teaching. I ended up becoming an assistant principal at a high school back here in the Bay Area where I'm from. And what I realized was that, you know, as an Asian woman who is cisgendered, I am very privileged, and I am in a very privileged position. I was always really interested in tech. And I just saw all of my students, I worked in urban schools. I saw a lot of my students not get the same opportunities that I did, for the only reason being the color of their skin. So I realized that if I wanted to make a bigger impact on communities I cared about, I really had to leave this school behind, because, you know, in a school I'm working with like 600 students and their families. But if I really want to make a deeper impact on our community, then I really need to get out there and find a way to use my privilege to help others break into technology, and like bring education to the masses. So that's why I made the switch into tech. I really love where I work. Our Learning Equality's goal is to bring education to anybody who wants to have it in the world. The problem is not everybody in the world has the internet, and the internet is where the best educational resources lie. Like, a lot of people in a lot of different countries are working off textbooks from like the 50s, the 60s, and when you're already behind and you don't have the internet, you can't move forward. And so what our organization does is we actually package a lot of the open educational resources that are online. So think Khan Academy, YouTube, we package it for offline use. So we have an app that does that. That way, you know, students who just have like a really old Android or like a really old tablet, don't have internet access, can actually get access to a Khan Academy video, right? And this way we're trying to like close that gap between the people who have stuff and the people who don't. So that was kind of long, but that's what I do, and I really like doing it.
Oh, awesome, thanks. I could have really used that app when I was in the Peace Corps. When I did the Peace Corps response in Burkina Faso, I actually worked at an all-girls Catholic school, like in the middle of friggin' nowhere.
Yeah.
And I like downloaded like a copy of Wikipedia and stuff and put it in the computer lab. Like, they had a computer lab that was donated by this German NGO, but there's no internet. So
Exactly.
before I went there, I collected a whole bunch of resources, but I don't think your app existed back then. That was 10 years
I don't
ago.
think so.
But yeah. So,
yeah, that's exactly what it's designed to do.
Yeah, you should collab with Peace Corps. I mean, everybody got evacuated because of COVID, but hopefully it'll start back up again this year.
Yeah.
Okay, how about our other guests? Anna? Is it Anna or Anna?
It's Anna, thank you. And Sairina, you and I share so much. We're just meeting for the first time, but I too come from a background of education. And I was snooping a little on your LinkedIn and saw you were with KIP while I was with Achievement First.
Oh, nice.
So I've got a heart for educating, and it was with the little ones. I was a kindergartner and first grade teacher for a long time. And then eventually life happened, and my husband and I ended up moving out of New York, where we had been, to Philly, and it was kind of a like fresh start time. And then a child came along, namely my son. And then we moved again over to New Jersey. And so for a long time, I was just going in and out of different careers, trying to figure out whatever I could do temporarily. And then I ended up at an ed tech company in New York, and it was very random, had no intention of getting into technology, but I did. And I was working in customer service, so very parallel to software engineers and product specialists. And I saw what they were doing, and I was like, oh, that looks very interesting. And I also discovered that knowing what they knew about our product would actually help me help our customers better. So it was a bit twofold, my curiosity, but also I was like, I gotta help the people better. So that led me to Flatiron. And I graduated in May of 2020. So again, not far after Sairina graduated. And it took about 3 months of a lot of what felt like chaos in the midst of a pandemic. But I did find a company, Aware3, a very small company that works a lot with churches and religious schools. And we have apps for their community so that they can be together when they can't be together in person. So very timely, a great company. I feel lucky to get to work with the people I do because they are great with newbies. So happy times. Yeah. So that's that.
Awesome. Thank you. So just in case anybody has just joined, I am posting the Slido link where questions are best to be asked. So open that up, even if you don't have a question right now, open it into a new tab so you have it. And then you can vote for other questions too. And then I'll just get into the questions. So this first one here, someone is curious, how did you structure your resumes if you were a career transitioner? This person was a marketer for 7 years and just finished up Bootcamp. So there's not relevant tech experience yet.
Well, I can get us started. So I like similarly in a way, I came from an education background, which did not feature technology. What I did have was that more recent job at an ed tech company. So I really worked it up, and I painted my life at that ed tech company as doing more technical stuff than customer service stuff. It was all the truth. I did not lie on my resume, but I highlighted the pieces that I thought were the most relatable. And I think that translates to any job that you're in. If you're in marketing, you had to communicate very well with your teams. You had to project plan and get things done. Like, you can take some of those skills that will be applicable to any job and toss them in there. So that would be like my number one recommendation. Look for the skills that you can out of, especially your most recent job, because that's going to be right at the top. But also secondarily, in your summary, you can paint a nice little story where you don't have to necessarily have tech skills, but you can again talk about the type of person that you are and the type of passion you have, or what great like skills you've been able to hone over the years, and it doesn't have to be tech focused.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Anna said. Oh my God, he's so cute. And so like, number one, any transferable skills that you have from any past work is really, really important. And any sort of leadership skills or positions that you have, I think that what was helpful for me when finding this job, or what set me apart from other people, because I'm actually doing some hiring now for our org for some engineers. And what I see on their resumes, the people who don't have a lot of technical skills, but come in with a lot of other experiences, are also really, really important on an engineering team. You would still be really surprised at how so many engineering teams still have that like tech bro culture, and people just don't know how to talk to each other, right? So any sort of transferable skill you have from another industry, super, super helpful. Another thing that I found really helpful was that, so like my only experience with tech, with like coding specific things was from my boot camp, where at the end of our boot camp, we basically had like an internship with a company. And so I wrote about that in my resume. So that was like a tiny little part though. What took up a lot of space on my resume was something that Sam actually brought up when he came and spoke to our boot camp. And it was like, join open source projects. Because I like, before I was able to get my job, I was like, you know what, why don't I just try and help other projects and like get my hands dirty in some code and just like see how pull requests actually work, and like review other people's code. And that actually gave me a lot of confidence in like, oh, I can actually do this job, right? Like I can read other people's code. It's not just like reading my own like couple lines of code that I wrote. So that actually took up space on my resume, but also like it highlighted that like I now had experience of reading code and writing code that wasn't just my own, or wasn't just like my classmates or cohort mates code. So I would also highly, highly suggest like looking at open source projects.
Which project did you contribute to?
The one that I wrote the most about, the one that I really enjoyed being a part of, was Operation Code. And what they do, if you haven't heard of Operation Code, is that they help former military members and veterans who want to break into the tech industry do that. And so they have a really strong group of people who work on this. And like basically it's just maintaining their site. And what this project that I was working on used Python, and it was just writing a script to connect the Airtable API to something that they were working on internally. So like these projects are out there, and Operation Code is specifically known for its beginner friendliness. So if anyone who's listening is interested, like check out Operation Code. They always need the help. Their team is awesome, and they like, somebody like sat down with me and just like worked with me, even on their own open source project. So I really appreciated that mentorship, even though I was the one who was trying to help them.
And how did you find that opportunity to work on that?
Yeah, I just used Google. I Googled beginner open source projects, and like a list came up, and I just clicked around and looked for ones that I found really interesting. I also know that GitHub has an option where you can just search for beginner open source projects, and I think Operation Code pops up there too, but there's so many out there, and people are just so willing to help. Also, just to plug this, our code is also open source.
Awesome. You gotta drop the link for us.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so while you do that, I will go ahead and ask the next question. What did each of you do to continue coding after boot camp, and what resources did you use to prepare for technical interviews? Obviously, we've heard a little bit of your answer, Sairina.
I will start by saying it did take me a little while to figure out how much time to spend coding, because I felt like I had to front load so much with resume, LinkedIn profile, hosting any projects that I had built, portfolio. So that took precedent for a while, which wasn't my favorite thing, because it made any technical interviews really hard, because I felt like my head wasn't in that space. But once I did figure that stuff out, then I started to get into Wes Boss's JavaScript 30. And I had I had signed up for it for free earlier that spring, and I just sat on it. But then I eventually afterward decided, well, why don't I get into that because I knew I wanted a front end job, and I figured JavaScript is what all the front end folks are really hiring for. And my foundation was still very shaky. I graduated from boot camp, failed my first technical interview, and knew I needed to practice. So those videos helped because Wes Boss would teach you something, and it would again be foundational JavaScript, nothing super fancy. But you could pause the video, try it out on your own, and then play the video. Did I get it? Did I get close? And I loved that. And then I would usually write some sort of blog or not even a blog post, but notes to jot down my takeaways. And for me, that helped cement a little bit more of that cycle of getting a foundational something, writing about it, and then I'd be able to implement it, say, in something else I was building or working on later. That last piece didn't always happen, but if I could see something more than once, then it stuck in my brain better. But I loved that because every day it would be a video, and I never had to ask myself, what do I do today? It was just a West Boss video and a blog post, and it was easy for me to do it. And then it became routine. And every now and like every Friday, I would meet up with an interview prep group that I had co-hosted through Flatiron, and we would do a elite code problem together, and we would practice that coding together, talking out loud, and that would be every Friday. So those two things I think were the most beneficial. Wes Boss's videos, and then like elite code wars, something with somebody else.
Yeah, I highly recommend JavaScript 30 as well. I do that every time, I think, before I go into interviews. And I'm planning on doing meetups where we can do JS30 in React instead, because I think a lot of us have done JS30. And if you haven't, you can go do it now. And then when we, then you'll have an idea what we're doing when we're doing it in React. I've never done it in React. There's just a lot of interviews people are doing seem to have React problems. So I figured we'll just do the problems, we'll do them in React. So you can see the difference between the vanilla solution and then solution in React. Yeah. Sairina, you got any tips on how you prepared for your interviews?
Yeah. So one thing that was helpful for me, but was really nerve-wracking, was Prompt, prompt.com. It's if you haven't heard of Prompt before, it is a way to you just get connected with another engineer who is either somebody who's kind of like you, who's looking for their first job, or somebody who's really senior. But basically, you get to ask each other interview questions, and it's usually like something you would find in Cracking the Code. Is that Cracking the Coding interview? That's the book, yeah, something like that, right? It's one of those like coding challenges, and you would just pretend it was an interview, and you would be the interviewer in one round, and you would be the interviewee in the other round. And so that was I did a couple of those. My friend who actually got a job not too long after me, he used to do it like really often on Prompt, and so much so that they actually reached out to him and asked if he wanted a job with Prompt. So I'm just saying, like, whatever you do, and I think this is kind of to Braidy, not Braidy, Anna's point as well. It has to be habitual, right? You have to get into the habit of doing things over and over and over again. So no matter what you do, like that's how you keep coding. Because honestly, when you've just given birth and there's like a million things happening, and you have a toddler at home because it's a pandemic, and you also have like a dog that you're trying to take care of, and your partner is working, it's really hard to find time to code, right? Like days are crazy. And so whatever habits you can put into code, whether it's just like one line of code, seriously, like you just have to do it every day. I also knew other people from my cohort who like would start and then stop and then start and then stop. And like I love them to death, but they are finding it really hard to get the motivation to like keep going after they've gotten a couple of rejections, right? So really it's like sticking to a habit. And for me, the accountability part of the habit was really in another thing that Sam had shared when he came to speak to our cohort at our boot camp, which was do 100 days of code on Twitter, because seriously, like it's just such a positive environment there. Like you just post like what you did that day. And even if I was like, I literally just like opened some code, like did one tiny problem on Leak Code, people would be like, awesome, good job. And really that was all I needed to hear to keep going. And so I really credit that accountability, that community to really like keep me coding and going when like you're just kind of by your, well, I wasn't by myself, unfortunately, but like most of us are kind of by ourselves and it's hard to keep that momentum going. Like find your community, and a really great place to do that is surprisingly Twitter.
Awesome. Thank you. How was the process on job hunting for the engineering roles that you ended up with?
How was the process? Is that question like what did you do to find a job, or like how did you find the process? Was it stressful? Like,
Oh,
are there any more details about this
there's no more
question?
details.
Okay.
I interpreted it as kind of like, did you do more networking than applying, cold applying type thing? But you can interpret it however you'd like, and also tell us if it felt stressful.
Well, by golly, if it didn't, then I think I was doing something very wrong. Yes, it was stressful. But yes, this is one of the points that I like. I'm so excited that I get to finally say it because I felt it was so important that figuring out your way of job hunting, it like to me, it was never like a one and done thing. I had to constantly revise what I was doing. And basically, every week I had a little meeting with myself and I had to say, is what I did this week moving the needle? And every week I would literally change something. Like I said in the beginning, at first it was all about getting all the like resume stuff prepped and ready. And then I had to be like, what the heck am I doing? I need to be coding. But every week I had to like go back and revisit. So my answer is not very clear cut, but I will tell you that the job hunt process started with me being very nervous to apply anywhere. And I think that's why I focused on my resume and my LinkedIn. And I'm like, oh, I don't have my portfolio, so I couldn't possibly apply. I don't recommend that. Bite the bullet, send the applications out, because honest to goodness, you're probably not going to get noticed for a little while anyway. So just start applying. And when I eventually did, as soon as I applied maybe 10 places, I wasn't so nervous anymore. And I didn't care about where I was applying, meaning I didn't look at a job application and think, oh, is this a company I can see myself at? Which I was doing in the beginning. I was like, good software engineer, front end, like that's it. That's all I needed. And if it was a job that said associate or junior, and I knew that like, ooh, I could actually stand a chance, then I would spend a little more time on the application and put a little more of like, oh, yes, I would love to work here because, and research that company. And the rest of the time, I was just like, pew, 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 quick apply, go, go, go. So that was job applications. And ultimately, I wanted that to take up the smallest amount of time because that felt the least fruitful for my own progress. Necessary, but little. And then the other like 40% coding. So West Boss 30, meetups on Friday, like building a good 40% at least. And then the other 40% really was talking to people. And my idea of networking felt a little different from what Flatiron, where I went, recommended. I think their approach was much more talk to the people, get the jobs, get the in. And that felt uncomfortable for me. So I was like, talk to the people, tell them I think what they're doing is really cool and love to hear more about it. And what that did for me was it kept me motivated. And every time I would talk to somebody, I'd be like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. I really do want to keep going for it. I don't want to quit on that. I want that. Even when I felt like nobody really wanted me, they kept me going. So I think, like, to recap all that, find what works for you first and foremost. Uh, Look back on what you're doing to see, does this work, doesn't it? And then whatever keeps you motivated, keep doing more of that. Because I feel like that's the harder part. I think, Brady, you said something akin to, it is very hard to keep going. Or maybe it was Sairina, I forget. Like, finding your community and your people to help you keep going is so important. So however that may look for you, like, do that.
I keep getting attributed to saying these very wise things, and I've never said any of them, so thank you.
Let's see. I think to Anna's point, like, it's really a lot easier to go into the process. Is never easy, that's for sure. But it is a lot easier to go into the process if you're very clear with what you want, whether you're clear with what you want in the process or you're clear with what you want in your job, right? So if you know exactly what you're looking for, then you know how to hone in your time and prioritize your time appropriately, right? So I think something else that Anna said really resonated with me, and it was around how, yes. So, for my ladies out here, we're really socialized to be perfect. We're really socialized to always only raise our hand in class when we have the right answer. Whereas, and I have a son and a daughter, so I have seen this happen even when other people talk to them, though nobody really talks to them because we're in the middle of the campus. But what I've noticed is that people really encourage boys at a very young age to just try and fail and try again, whereas people encourage young women and girls to, like, really just be perfect all the time, right? And so because of that, I think even for us who have come through boot camps, even for us who are career changers, even for those of us who are old like me, like, we are just like, it's so ingrained in us to, like, don't try until everything fits into this, like, nice little box and everything's perfect. So don't apply, don't send out your resume until every little thing is perfect. Make sure that cover letter is 100% like ready to go. And that holds us back because all the boys around us, all the young men around us are actually just, like, throwing it into the ring, right? And so we, like, to Anna's point, you have to shift that mindset. You have to just say, like, I'm just going to do it, and I'm probably going to fail, because you will fail. It's something that I've had to reckon with. And the way that I framed it for myself during the job hunt in particular was that because I graduated in April and then I was going to have my baby in May, I was like, well, in this month, there is literally no way that I could get a job and start anyway. So let me just apply. So that's when I just, like, threw out a whole bunch of job applications and got a whole bunch of no's back. And that really helped set me up for more failure, set me up for success or failure. I don't know, both, right? So you just have to, like, shift your way of thinking about this. And it is hard, and it is hard, especially for women. It is hard for everybody in general. Men, I'm not discounting you, but it is especially hard for us sometimes. And we just have to say, like, I'm going in this with the expectation of failing, but also with the expectation that I'm going to try again and it'll be okay.
Yeah, that's sorry, go ahead,
Oh,
Anna.
no, you go, I'll go after you.
I was just going to say, how it sounds like you were kind of in a way desensitizing yourself to how scary it is to fail. And I was listening to a podcast recently. I want to read the book. It was, I think, Sanjay Gupta. And he was talking about different strategies of improving people's longevity and how important like exercise and like the things that you would expect to be important are, but also putting yourself in a situation frequently, like every day, that scares you is really healthy for you. And it just made me think how I wanted to say it at some point in this meetup that like it's scary thinking that you're going to get rejected. And not only are you putting yourself in the position to potentially get a job, but think of how healthy you're being doing something a little bit scary for yourself. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Anna.
Oh yeah, no, that like just gonna hop right on the end of that train, because every software engineer that I spoke to during my job hunt, when I had told, like, they would inevitably ask, like, have you been applying? How many interviews are you getting? And I'd be like, don't judge, but not many. And everyone echoed that same sentiment of, you are going to fail more than you're going to succeed. It is just so normal. If I can tell you one thing and you believe me, it's that this is normal. And it helped to hear that, because any rejection to me feels very personal. Like, you are rejecting my soul, and it's taken me 3+ decades, I say very quietly, to build up myself, and now you are tearing me down. But to hear other engineers be like, this is par for the course and it's okay, it gave again that feeling of, all right, fine, this is okay. I'm not going to let that stop me. And I think what you said, Brady, exactly, like putting yourself in a situation where you don't know the outcome is so scary, but it can lead to such good things. You just never know where something is going to lead. So why not try it out? Yeah, that's scary.
All right. Oh, so this next question is asking, can we discuss salary? What is the correct starting salary for a junior developer? It's a person with a 4-year degree with a boot camp. Oh, okay. So one scenario would be 4-year degree with boot camp. Another scenario, no 4-year degree and a boot camp. And another scenario, CS degree, no experience. I'll see if you have thoughts before I say anything.
I just don't have enough information to like give answers for all three. I do believe in salary transparency, especially for women. So I'm happy to share my salary. It is not a lot. I work at a nonprofit. So I make about 75. And my nonprofit is actually based in San Diego. It is actually less than what I was making before as an assistant principal in education. That being said, if you work at a for-profit, it is going to be very, very different. There is somebody in my cohort who is starting at the end of this month. He's working at a company in Redwood City, so Bay Area. And he is going to start at 145 as his base, and his bonus puts him at 175 for the year. So that is about all I know. He is also going to be working mostly front end from what I know. So hopefully that's helpful. I do think that salary transparency is really hard to get at a lot of places. I am in a junior position, and so is he. So he's making twice as much as I am. But we work at very vastly different places. So just what you're looking for fulfillment.
Sorry to unmute myself. I know it's bad form at this point, but it was my question. I'm going to out myself. First of all, thank you so much for your salary transparency. I'm also somebody who's all about salary transparency, but I missed your colleague. Sorry, what was the difference other than him working for a for-profit as far as his experience level between you and us?
Oh, yeah, that's actually a good question. He we are similar in age. He also graduated from college with a 4-year degree and then worked for like almost 10 years in some other industry and then went to the boot camp and graduated. So we're very similar with our experience levels for things. He just happens to work at a for-profit.
Yeah, I don't think it matters on experience too much. It's varies widely depending on location, depending on the type of company, what stage of funding they're at, all kinds of things. That's why this question is really hard to answer, because it can range it can range from 0 to $200,000, or maybe even more than 200,000 if you start at Lyft as a junior. If you're able to get in as a junior, I think if you look on levels FYI, the junior engineer at Lyft gets like 220,000 or something, not base, that's total compensation. So it can vary widely. So this question it requires a lot more information, like what kind of company you want to work at. You got to research online, like, and 75,000 is not low. That, to me, that's pretty good starting salary. It's gonna, as you get better, your salary can go up a lot if you keep asking for raises, if you just go and apply to a different company, which is the Bay Area style of how to get raise your salary the fastest. People usually switch jobs about every 2 years here, not just to increase salary. It's also, in my opinion, it's also good to just gain different skill sets, because every team is different, and you gain knowledge by seeing how other teams work. So I learned different skills and stuff by every company I worked at. And just to let you know how much I started out at in 2013, my first paid gig was $25 an hour flat, no benefits, nothing. It's just contract work. And then when I got my first full-time job, I only made $48,000 for like my first year, because they had no funding. And I did get equity, but the equity was worth nothing. They're still a private company, but I stayed there for almost 2 years, and I left with, I think I have like 75,000 shares, but it's still a private company. So I don't get anything unless they go public, or if they get bought out or something, which I'm crossing my fingers that I'll just get a bonus check one day, because I did put in a lot of work that first year, and my salary was 48,000, so that was a lot less than 75,000, and I lived in San Francisco. So I just.
I'm sorry, I'm still trying to wrap my head around the salary difference between Sairina and her male colleague, because I don't have any, so I haven't worked in the industry yet, probably like most of the people on this call. But I do have close friends who work in the industry. And for instance, I'm aware of a very talented female engineer who's a senior engineer with over 10 years experience, only making $180. So the fact that your colleague is making $140, and I will also say, I come from a sales and marketing experience. I've got over 10 years of corporate experience doing that. I'm used to making between $140 and $180 in that industry. So I'm trying to figure out how much of a salary hit I should be willing to take for my first role. So again, I know this is a sensitive subject for everybody, but anybody who's willing to share real numbers, be they your numbers or something that you definitely know firsthand is real information, would be super helpful. I'm not just asking for myself. I'm a recent boot camp graduate, and I've got 10 people I'm in a network with, and we are all in the same boat trying to figure this thing out.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question, Natalie. And Sam, I also really appreciate you saying that 75 is like not a little. I think sometimes I forget that. This is, again, because I'm very privileged. my wife makes money. I can have a salary of 75 and be like okay with it. But I know that's not the case for a lot of people, where salary is really important to livelihood, and a lot of reason why people switch from whatever career they used to be in into tech. So thank you, Sam, for putting it back into perspective for me. And I'm sorry that I let my privilege show through. Yeah, so one of the other things I think when we talk about salary, it's, yes, there is like a female male component sometimes to it. But in this case, I don't think there was with my colleague. He's a really great person, and he just happened to go into a company that does something vastly different than my organization, right? And part of the reason why I'm okay with the salary, and I'm really happy with the salary, is that like the culture of my company is amazing, and it is just what I need right now. Like as a mom of two, and just like all of these personal things, like as you said, Natalie, like it's a very personal thing, right? Your salary and what you're going to be okay with. And yeah, like I knew what I was getting into. The benefits are really great. It's a really flexible schedule, and it's also located in San Diego, right? Very different. So like Redwood City, San Diego, very different living arrangements. Like, or what is that called? Living.
Cost of living?
Thank you.
Yeah, I knew
cost
what
of
you
living.
meant.
Thank you. Right, very different cost of living. And so like keeping these things in mind, right? Like salary is going to look very different. I just wanted to share like my own salary. I can also give way more context. We can also talk about this offline as like my decisions for working at a nonprofit specifically, as opposed to like taking an apprenticeship at another company. That was also like, those were the two things I was deciding between at the time. But yeah, having to talk about that offline, but also know that the range, like the salary range is like huge. There are also other people in my cohort who are working contract positions, right? And their hourly wage for their contract position is actually higher than my hourly wage, but they don't get benefits. So lots of trade-offs. It's really, really dependent on what you need.
Yeah, I actually really loved what Sam said about context really is everything. It is so hard to just look at numbers for all the reasons you just heard. I will share, I came into Aware3 as a junior or associate software engineer at 70K. And to me, I was like, oh my gosh, you're paying me to learn. Like, that's amazing. And I fully understood that there's room for growth at my company. They do not expect me to have this junior tag for very much longer. I will likely lose it by summer at the latest. With a title change comes a salary bump. And it's kind of that, like everyone has echoed it that I've spoken with software engineers, that the room for growth, title wise, pay bump wise, it is snappy. Like back in the land of education, it never would have worked out that way, but being in tech, it is different. So I take that as a very good thing, that if you prove yourself and you keep going, you keep learning, like you are going to get rewarded for that. And also it comes down to mindset of what you want out of your first job. And I think Sairina, you said this, like I knew that I needed nurturing, like I need to be mentored. I've got to be taught things. I need time to learn. I don't need someone breathing down my back. And Aware3 is all that and more. So 70K, honest to goodness, I'm like, they are paying me to learn. So it feels wonderful. And I know that, like just what Sam said, you go to a new company when you've been a software engineer for a while and then you move, like that is a legit way to grow salary wise, if and when that's your, like the next step for you in your career. So yeah, just like all of it take into account. A great question. Keep talking about it.
Yeah, and also I can share my salary ladder about how fast and how high it went. So I went from, before I was a software engineer, I was in the Peace Corps. So my salary is basically zero. um, I think they give us like a couple $1,000 a year for stipend just for living expenses. And then my first gig was 25 bucks an hour. I think my first full-time job was 48,000 until we got funding, and then I got bumped to 108,000. So I got a huge raise. And this is only base salary. I didn't get I didn't include the equity in total compensation because, like I said, it was worth zero. So I just considered it. It's just like a lottery ticket. So then my next gig was 118. So it kept going up from company to company. And then my next gig was so 118, and I didn't get any equity. So from there, I started getting jobs with equity. So I went to Pivotal next. My total compensation was 160. And then when I went to Lyft, I did a huge jump. I got my total compensation bumped up to 280. And now I make zero. So I'm back at my starting place. But just to give you an idea, like the salary is all over the place. It really depends on the company because you see, like I was already 5 years into my career and still the step function for me going from Pivotal to Lyft was more than $100,000. It's just because Lyft is one of the highest paying companies, at least for like junior and mid level. Senior level, you get to like Netflix, who like pays a lot. Like Netflix developers get paid a ridiculous amount of money. If you go and look on levels.fyi, we've had a Netflix engineer on this meetup before, Kelly Kwan. Brady just posted the video. So yeah, just to give you some more context, and then I can give away the Headspace code now since if anybody can post the link for the video for whoever posted first. Oh, Brian, you already won. I'm gonna have to give
anticipated it.
I'm gonna think of a different question. No, nobody who's won can win another code because you can't use the code twice.
Yeah, please, no, please give it to someone else. It's great. It's a great, Headspace is great.
I'll come up with a different question later. But yeah, so somebody posted in the chat key values. I think going and looking on that site is really helpful because I think a lot of junior engineers might be only thinking about salary, and I don't think that's the most important thing. It's subjective though. Salary is the most important thing to a lot of people. And it depends where you are in life. Like if you already saved a lot of money, then it's less important, right? Maybe. So key values kind of like helps you find out what's important to you, because yeah, your experience is going to be different, like depending on what company. There's so many different types of tech companies out there. So I assume is way different at a nonprofit than from like a small startup who has no funding yet to like a Series A company, Series B, Series C, public company. Depending what sector you're in, it like varies so much. So yeah, that's why this question comes up all the time, and it's not easy to answer. There's just Siri thinks I'm talking to her, but yeah, I'll shut up now. We can get back to the question.
Yeah, but it's great to always be talking to people and understanding, like it's kind of like getting into the market to like look for a house. Like the market can change really quickly. But the more like hard data points that you can gather, the more you can get a feel of like, okay, this is a good deal being offered to me type thing, in the money side. And again, yeah, it's the salary isn't the only important thing. I've talked to some people recently who I'm so glad they have left really terrible work environments. And we haven't talked about salary even one time. It was just like the environment that they had to go back and work in every single day was so miserable. So I think probably they would have been fine taking a slight hit in pay just to get a much more healthy environment. So, but yeah, very important. Thank you for bringing up that question. And this has been a great conversation about it, I think. So then I'll go on to the next question here. How did networking play into your job search? Is it more important for bootcamp grads? And are there any e-networking tips right now that would be super helpful?
I can share my thoughts on that. Let's see. So, yes, networking played a huge part in it. I don't know if it's because I'm a bootcamp grad, but I would assume that that's part of the reason why, because I just don't know enough people in the industry yet, right? And I don't know about salaries, for example. So it's good to like connect with other people. The way I did it, because I personally was not a fan of the cold emailing or the cold LinkedIn messaging. I felt that just wasn't authentic to me and how I communicate. That has to do with a lot of things, right? Like, but the way I went about it was I looked for groups online that had similar interests. So, for example, women who code, women in tech, lesbians who code, or no, I think we're called lesbians who tech, whatever. We're coding and teching, it doesn't matter. Out in tech, right? These are all identity markers for me. And they all have Slack channels. And that is a really easy way to make new friends, right? And so think about some communities that you are a part of. Those Slack channels exist. Go into them, join their boards, check out what jobs are posted there, and see what, like, see who wants to chat. So for one of the Slack communities that I'm part of out in tech, they have an engineers developers meet channel, and there's like a little bot that basically connects you with another engineer, and it switches every 2 weeks. And just with that, like you literally have to do nothing except sign up to be on this channel, and they'll pair you with somebody new every 2 weeks. It's up to you to decide whether or not to chat with them. Great, I just met a whole bunch of people from doing that, right? So because we are in a pandemic, a lot of these networking opportunities have shifted online. A really great way to do it, like in my opinion, is to use Slack.
Okay, I'm gonna give away I'm gonna try to give away the Headspace code again, because it goes with what you just said. Okay, if you won a code before, don't post the answer in the chat. Whoever can post a link, we shared the link for a GitHub repo that has the links to a bunch of tech Slacks. It's in our Slack channel, so you can find it in there if you want to like search for the link. That's my hint. So yeah, whoever can post the link for the GitHub repo that lists a whole bunch of Slack channels, so you can find your tribe. Boom, Aisha wins. So I will DM you. You got to be in our Slack. After the meetup, I'll DM you the code and let you know how you can redeem your Headspace. And thanks for sharing the link with everybody. Now everybody can go and start that repo. Anna, you got anything to add?
Yeah, I definitely agree about finding communities and your people. And I guess my overall advice would be to figure out your own style and go with that. Because I've spoken to many bootcamp grads, and like at Flatiron, we had a requirement for how many people we were supposed to meet with every week in order to like fulfill graduation requirements. And I always found those so awful because I just thought that is just not me. I don't want to meet a quota. I don't want to do it that way. And other people I spoke to, I just realized everyone needs their own way to do this a little more comfortably. So first of all, find out what that is for you. If it is joining a Slack community and meeting with like-minded people there and waiting for your in a conversation, that is awesome, very low risk. LinkedIn has groups, and those are also very low risk. You can join a JavaScript group and you don't have to participate, but you could find out other people who are posting, or maybe look at the job titles of the people in there and start to get a feel of, oh, you know what, it might be kind of neat to meet that person. And then you've already got a shared connection, like we're in this group or we're in this Slack channel together. Because you're right, Sairina, those cold emails do not feel good. I don't think they feel great to receive them either, to send or to receive. But having something to chat about, it feels a little less skeevy. The other thing, I don't know if like all boot camps are this way, but we had an alumni Slack, and I loved that place because there were engineers who had been working for a while, but they still hung out there. And somebody might post about an opportunity at their company, or they might post about, hey, there's an open source project, anyone want to join? And I just thought, oh, what better of an in than to talk to someone who not only went to school at the same place, but is now doing the thing. So they're a success story. Like, let me go meet them. But yeah, the long and the short, figure out how you communicate and what makes sense for you meeting people, because the communities are out there. There are so many ways to get plugged in. So just figure out what feels the best for you.
Can you say a couple words also on the group that you co-organized for the algorithm practice? I feel like that is also a really cool opportunity, and I think you had said it kept growing.
Oh yeah, it's still growing. So when I graduated, I needed to talk aloud through code, because that like I had been given so much feedback, like do this more and you will start to get better. Stop being so quiet. And so I did start a group of people in my cohort, people who I just gelled with and I liked. And we met every Friday. It was 8 of us, and we would pair off into groups of 2 for a leak code problem. And then like our Slack channels got combined and Flatiron switched a little bit. So our group got opened up publicly, which was not the intention, but it just happened and people found us. And all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, strangers, what fun, you know? We can keep helping each other, and it's still going on without me. People have come and gone. When they've gotten jobs, they disappear. But it has been so friendly, because I think Pramp, like I never did it because I was so intimidated. I was like, no, just no. But if you're around other people in your cohort and then you're talking through code, which is still hard, and vulnerabilities, but if you're with familiar people, that felt great. So yes, that happened kind of organically, and anyone in a Flatiron channel can join that, but like you could also do that too, and that could be an easy win. Just like get something going more organically like that.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, moving on then. How do you focus your search? Or how did you, I guess? Right now, there are so many job titles to choose from, and this person is not completely sure what they should be looking for.
I can share first. For me, it was less about the title. Our organization is actually a flat structure. We practice holacracy, which is what Zappos was kind of put on the board, if you're interested in learning more about it. But basically, we just have roles in different circles. It's kind of crazy. Anywho, so for me, when I was looking for jobs, I was actually looking for mission fit. What I wanted to work at a place that I was going to really be passionate about. This is why I ended up at a nonprofit, right? And so I think when you're looking for jobs, sometimes the titles are really confusing. Like, what's the difference between a full stack developer and a full stack engineer and a junior and associate, right? Like, nobody really knows. Well, at least I don't really know, but I'm pretty sure that different companies just name different things, right? One of my mentors, she had a job where she is supposed to be front end, but she works full stack, for example. So honestly, I think the only advice I can give is really know what you're looking for in a company, more than a particular job title. Because if you get into a company, right, your responsibilities can change. Your job title can also change. That's actually something you can negotiate before taking a job offer, right? You can actually discuss with the person who's trying to hire you, hey, you want me at your company? Can we actually change the title of my job? Things like this happen, right? So I guess my advice is just be clear with what you want. Everything else will sort of fall into place.
There was something that really saved my behind, and I learned this from someone who I was working with coaching wise. There are job descriptions galore, and they all have these different sections where it might describe the job, maybe some soft skills, and then maybe your technical skills. And what I was told to do to help me narrow down my focus, and what really indeed did help, and I highly recommend, was to do this market analysis of what jobs are out there and what you're looking for and what is needed from you in order to get a job there. So what that actually looked like, taking an Excel tracker, for example, and on the first column, listing all the way down, you just start writing a skill per line, whether it's great communication, AWS, technical soft skills, you write them all. And then on each following column, you would write down the job that you're looking at. So one job, maybe it's Lyft that you're looking at. And so you write Lyft in the top, and then you just put a little check mark for any of those skills that are at Lyft. So if strong communication is a requirement on Lyft's job description, check that box. If there's a skill that you have not already listed, add it to the list of all of them. And you do that for every company. So the next column is Aware 3, and you look at their description and their tech skills. And eventually, say you have 10 jobs and you've got these 10 columns with a check mark for each of the skills, then you can start to tally up, what are these jobs really wanting in me? Because you will start to see themes, and I certainly did. And it might be, JavaScript, it might be React, it might be PHP, whatever they are, you will start to see trends in what you're looking for, the jobs that you would like to work at and what they're asking for. And from there, I would take those skills and add them into my schedule of what to work on and study. But I think in terms of finding a job and how to narrow your search, that's a really good way to be well, I've got all of these skills and I'm seeing them pop up a lot on backend jobs. So maybe I should switch my focus to backend, or whatever the case may be. But it felt like less of a shot in the dark and more of the market has spoken. and they're facts and it's not up for debate. Like that's what's out there. So that's what I'm looking for. But that did help me narrow in. And then I could simply ignore jobs that I knew I didn't have what they were looking for at all. So that did help me narrow in a little bit.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. It is a really good process. Sometimes people might not start to see trends until they have like 50 to 100 jobs on that list. But yeah, being able to kind of break things down and look at data is always helpful. And yes, knowing what you are looking for is just so helpful. Even if you don't end up checking all of the boxes, even if you get a different opportunity and you just like are at the end of your runway and need a job, if it's a software engineer job, like it doesn't mean that you have to stick to all of those things that you're looking for, but having direction is wonderful. Totally agree. All right, well then I guess we can move on to the next question. This person's wondering if there's any chance to land a first job as a back-end job remotely. Like they're going through this process of a career change, and I think they're hoping to see what their chances are for a remote job. They don't have any experience and are really just learning by themselves.
We were just looking for a back-end engineer. Yes, so the answer is yes. It is totally possible. We literally were just looking for one. Like you just missed the cutoff, unfortunately. But those jobs are absolutely out there. And just like I said before, I am still part of the hiring process. And we take a lot of things into consideration, right? Like we have different criteria if you're a mid to senior level applicant versus if you're a recent bootcamp applicant, like bootcamp grad applicant. Like yes, the answer is yes.
And I think like that's so funny. My ear went to like the remote part. Like, is it possible for a remote job? And I actually think this is your time because most companies are still remote. My company is a great example of this. They're based out of Kansas City, Missouri, and they were in person, but like week 1 of COVID, they were like, everyone home, we're not doing this health scare, like you go be safe, kids. And everyone was home. The company was transformed to a remote company overnight, and they really like went with the switches in terms of they opened up hiring nationwide, which is a big reason why I got hired. I'm on the East Coast, and they were like, as long as you're within 2 hours of Central Time, we can consider you. And that to me was one example. Yes, the company I'm at, but they're not alone. Most companies right now are still remote. They may eventually go back to in person. A lot of them hope to, but with the way of the world, I imagine that until folks are vaccinated, that people will not go back to work until that. That's just me spouting off information that's not factual, but that's what seems to be the case. So yes, your chances of being remote are very high. And I'll also say with video, like either Slack, like we use Slack video all the time, other companies Zoom, but that has made the being remote thing feel not scary bad at all, because like I'm on a video call for maybe half the day if I would like to be pair programming, asking a question, giving someone else help. And it's easy. Like no one, there's no feeling of like, oh, I haven't heard from so and so in a while. You're very connected even though you're remote. So I think it is awesome and great. I love being remote, and the opportunities I think will keep in that direction for quite a while.
Yeah, I just posted a link in the chat about these survey results from, I think it's Initialized, and it's kind of crazy, 2020 versus 2021, where they asked companies, if they were to start, where they would start it. And last year, 41% said San Francisco. 2021, 42% said remote or distributed or remote, and San Francisco dropped to 28%. So it's changing fast.
Crazy. All right. I see a question that's near and dear to my heart. What are some ways you dealt with nerves and imposter syndrome while looking for your first job in tech?
Oh, I'm dying over here. Brady and I actually worked on imposter syndrome together. Like Brady was one of my people. And my gosh, I had it bad. I had it real bad. I would freeze during technical interviews. Like you already know, I didn't send out applications because imposter syndrome. And Brady and I, we worked very hard on this. And she was a great ear and a great support. And eventually, what it came down to was me figuring out what gave me confidence and channeling that. And I ended up creating a bit of a list so that I would remember, like it was a physical piece of paper, listing things that would help me like go back to my roots of you deserve to be here, you have what it takes. That list is going to look different for everybody, but to give you just a few examples of what was on there in case this interests you for doing it for yourself, things like look where you started. And I started knowing no code. I was a cold turkey code person. And in 2019, I knew nothing. And after graduation, like I knew so much, even though it felt like there's still so much I didn't know. What I did know truly surprised me. And things like joining a code newbies channel, posting on 100 days of code to see what other people are posting about. It was like that confirmation that you are growing and you know things. Very hard to remember that in the moment when you feel like you know nothing. So things like that. And I highly recommend it. Create your own list or reminder or something that you can go back to when you just start to freeze, because no matter what, you truly do have what it takes. You like, there's nobody out there who can't do this thing. If you put your mind to it and you put in the work and every day you're moving the needle, you can do it. No one is telling you no. So like get whatever those things are for you to bring you back to, I can do this.
100% everything that Anna just said. I'm just going to add that I was not the top student in my cohort by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, I can code, like, don't get that wrong. But I wasn't the smartest. Like, I didn't come in with the most experience. I would say that I was like middle to the like on the lower half if we were to compare my skills even leaving boot camp as compared to the rest of my cohort. And I still found a job. That alone should tell you, like, you have, if you're on this path and you care about this work, you are going to be able to make it, right? The imposter syndrome happens every day with me now, even with a job. Even though I'm the most junior person there, I'm constantly having to tell myself, like, you're gonna learn something. You're gonna know more today than you did the day before, right? Just like what Anna was saying. Like, I think like reflection is really, really important in these scenarios, and also like knowing where you stand against other people. Like, you are just not going to know that much. Like, and just know that there is at least one person who wasn't the strongest in their boot camp and still got a job. Now you know her, right? It's okay. You will make it. Imposter syndrome is super duper real, and like, yeah, just be reflective. Just think about like, what's the one thing you learned today. You now know one thing more than the day before, and it's gonna be real. And yeah, are people gonna look at you funny? Probably. that's okay. Like, you're a learner, right? I think somebody wrote in the chat, like, think of your first job as like you learning. If you go in with that mindset, like, there's nowhere to go but up. So yeah.
And actually, you don't just know one student who wasn't top of the line, you know two, because I also was not top of the line at my boot camp. So it is so true. It is not always about your technical skills and how much you know. I actually think a very human piece of this is your passion for what you're doing. I truly believe that employers are looking for someone who cares. Skills are great, knowledge is great, but that can be taught. They cannot teach you to be passionate about your job. If you're just there to make money, they probably will pass on you. Some companies will. So yeah, have the passion, have your why for what you do, make a great story for yourself. And it doesn't just have to be your technical skills, in case you happen to be in the boat of not being super strong.
Hey, I'm number 3. I also was very much not one of the top graduates of my cohort. I had to repeat multiple sections of the boot camp, but I had grit, and that ends up being like what will make people successful, I believe. That whole growth mindset that I'm always talking about, that all of us are always talking about here. Yeah.
It's funny you said grit. I posted a link right when you said that to the book called Grit.
Yeah. I ended up being voted most likely to be at the boot camp because I just constantly felt like I'm not getting this. And like watching other people, like it would click for other people. So I ended up, totally burnt myself out because of it, but a 12-hour day at the boot camp was a short day for me. It was usually more like 14, sometimes like 15 hours. Not that I would necessarily recommend that, but like I had to stick with it. And if anyone has seen the link to that talk that I did give about imposter syndrome, I love so much. There's a tweet in it. Somebody tweeted about meta imposter syndrome, where you're aware that imposter syndrome exists, but what you have isn't actually imposter syndrome. You just actually aren't as good as other people type thing. And I was just talking to someone about this type thing. I'm like, no, but you really do have to look back at where you came from and recognize you do know stuff. And for where you're at in your journey, you likely it's probably, there's a range of what people would know at your experience, and you're very much likely to be within that range. So I could talk about this all day. But also, I don't know if I froze. Did I? Okay, that's good. Maybe we can do like one last question, because I imagine the mothers here probably don't have unlimited time. So which projects did you use on your resume to get interviews?
Oh yeah, at Flatiron we did 5 projects. 3 were in Ruby and different frameworks, and 2 in JavaScript. And I hosted the 4 that could be hosted. One of them was just like terminal based, so I could not host that, but 4 of them I could. And I was like putting them all out there. Not impressive. I am not lying when I say that. They are not impressive, but they met the minimum, what is it, like minimum viable product? Like that's exactly what it was. And it was things that it's what I had coded. It was my work for this new career, and I banked on those being my in, because that was literally the only place I could be like, look what I can do. Even if I don't think it's great, it's still something I can do. So I used all 4 of them. They're hosted they were hosted live. It was my portfolio, and I just made sure that there were no errors, that they worked well, that other people could click on the link and it was fine. And then I let them go. I have no data to say like how many people looked at them or if they helped or not, but I put them all out there, and they were also on my resume and LinkedIn profile. Just talked to those up, all of
Very similar. I basically put up any projects that I created during my boot camp. But I really focused my energies on like one or two that I felt that I could talk about really well. And I think that's really useful for you to think about as you're looking for your first job. Like, what is something that could be a little bit uglier, but like I can talk about, and I can talk about my role and like what I specifically created, and like I can talk about the ins and outs and the technical aspects really, really clearly about. Like that's the one you want to focus on, or those are the two things you want to focus on. So for me, it was like one of my projects. The other ones I sort of was like, I made them, but like I don't really remember exactly what I did or how I did it. But like I focused my attention on one, and I also focused attention on one of the open source projects. That like one of the things I did in the open source project, because I like that was something I did on my own completely. Like I remembered everything, and it was really recent. So if you can focus your attention on something that you can talk about really, really deeply, that's really impressive for somebody who's looking for a junior position.
Awesome. Great advice. Okay. Well, there's still a ton of great questions, but I think we're at the end of our time for today. So thank you so much, both Sairina and Anna. It has been wonderful having you here and knowledge bomb.
Yeah, thanks a lot for
Thank you
joining
for
us.
having us, and thank you for everyone for listening to us speak and having great questions. And please don't hesitate to keep in touch. I really do mean that. Find me on LinkedIn, send me a message. Like, happy to help out in any way that I can. Rooting for you.
Likewise, thank you, everybody. This was really fun.